Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here, coming at you with a little explanation/discussion video about draw power in Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, Allure of Darkness. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because lately I've been building and testing my What a Deck decks on stream to get viewer feedback, and while it's been mostly helpful, I was a little surprised by the amount of people who kept recommending Allure of Darkness in decks that can't really make good use of it. There seems to be this general misconception about draw power in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone who builds decks with a competitive mindset knows that drawing cards is good, but they don't seem to realize that not all draw power is created equal. There are several different kinds of draw power, and not every kind works for every deck. To see what I mean, let's go ahead and look at Allure of Darkness. If you're not familiar with it, it's a pretty simple spell card. It says draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from your hand. Or, if you don't have any in your hand, send your entire hand to the graveyard. Now obviously there's some risk involved with the last part of that effect, since you lose your hand if you don't have a monster to banish, but that's actually not important for what I want to talk about, so just ignore that part for now. The main thing I'm interested in is the draw 2 cards, banish 1 monster effect. While it does draw you cards, clearly, it doesn't actually gain you any hand advantage. It's what we'd call an advantage neutral effect. Like, if you have 2 cards in hand, a lure and 1 monster, and you use a lure, you're still only going to have 2 cards in hand. Because while you did draw 2, a lure itself will be gone along with whatever you banished for it. Now this by itself is not inherently bad. In fact, in most decks, that's a perfectly reasonable effect. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game all about getting to your win condition cards, so being able to dig through your deck and essentially trade the allure in your hand for another random card can be really useful. In fact, this kind of digging draw power is exactly why a card like Upstart Goblin is too good to remain at 3. It lets you go through your deck faster, and the faster you get to your power cards, the more likely you are to win. Now the problem that can arise with Allure, the reason you might not want to play it, is because of the cost. You specifically have to give up a dark monster in order to draw, and that can be bad if your deck's powerful win condition cards are all dark monsters. The best example I can think of for this is Abyss Actors, a pendulum archetype focused almost entirely around dark pendulum monsters. While there are definitely some powerful spell traps in the archetype, they tend not to be useful unless you have your scales up or several monsters on board, and most of their powerful spells can be searched with the monsters. So above all with Abyss Actors, you want monsters in your hand, and you want as many as possible. As such, giving up a monster with a lure is actually counterproductive a lot of the time. Like, let's say you banish that dark monster and you draw 2 monsters. Hurrah! You're better off than when you started. But if you banish that 1 monster and only draw 1 monster in return, you're right back where you started. And if you draw no monsters, then you've undoubtedly made things worse for yourself. You can see a similar principle at work in a lot of zombie decks. Regardless of what archetype you're playing, you almost always want to see Unizombie in your hand. It's not necessarily your win condition, but its powerful effects are critical for opening up all your plays and getting to your win condition. The problem then is, what do you do if you open up with Unizombie, Allure, and a bunch of cards that aren't dark monsters? Either you give up your main playmaker to hopefully draw into better cards, or you summon Unizombie, and then Allure sits mostly dead in your hand. My point is, anytime you have neutral draw power that asks you to give up some resource to draw, whether it's Allure of Darkness, Trade-In, Sacred Sword of 7 stars, you need to be sure that the resource you're using to pay that cost isn't the same resource you're trying to draw into in the first place. Otherwise, you can end up with an inconsistent deck that'll just draw from 1 brick hand into another brick hand. Now with all that being said, Allure of Darkness is still a great card in many situations. If you're playing a deck where spell traps are your main playmakers, then banishing a monster to potentially draw into one of them, probably a good idea. Similarly, if you're playing a deck of mostly monsters, that'll increase the chances that you'll draw into 2 of them off of Allure, potentially making it more worthwhile to run. And of course, if you have dark monsters in your deck that gain effects when they're banished, or if your deck has some way to easily recover banished monsters, then the cost isn't really a cost at all. Overall, Allure of Darkness is a solid choice for most dark-based decks. Just be aware that it's not always a good choice. Different decks sometimes need different kinds of draw power. But that's just my thoughts on the matter. Whether you disagree or just want to add something to the discussion, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I'll try to respond to everyone eventually. Like I said in my last discussion video, I'm kind of new at these, so let me know what you think about them. Would you like to see more of these videos explaining my thoughts on cards and deck building? Or should I spend my time elsewhere, perhaps working on new acapellas or something? Let me know down in the comments as well. Regardless of what you thought, thanks for watching, and until next time, good luck, and have fun.